Perros.
Well, good afternoon, or actually it's morning here in sunny West Houston on the Gulf Coast of Texas. Uh, Election day, post-election, and we still don't have the national results. I'm Orlando Sanchez with Texas Latino Conservatives, and we want to welcome you. Queremos darle la bienvenida el día después de las elecciones del año 2020 y claro que estoy acompañado con la gran dama del estado de Texas, no la
Claro,
ciudad de Houston.
mira cómo me vine vestida hoy.
La gran dama
De rojo,
Texas.
porque logramos mantener a Texas completamente rojo. Bienvenidos a nuestro Facebook Live, TLC Live, como todos los miércoles a las 11 de la mañana, más o menos, con Orlando Sánchez y Andrea Gómez. En la mañana, el día después de las elecciones presidenciales, elecciones generales, donde tuvimos una jornada histórica, donde todavía estamos esperando resultados, donde todavía estamos a la expectativa de los resultados sobre todo de las campañas presidenciales, pero las buenas noticias es que logramos mantener el estado de Texas completamente rojo y por eso estoy vestida de rojo, vestida de gala el día de hoy.
Y no solamente el estado, sino, Andrea, como ustedes saben, la organización de nosotros, Texas Latino Conservatives, conservadores latinos del estado de Texas, empezamos menos de hace 11 meses. Y la meta de nosotros queríamos lograr mantener la legislatura del estado de Texas, los diputados estatales, en las manos de los republicanos. Y eso lo hemos logrado. Y yo prognostiqué en mi página, I predicted on my Facebook page, for those of you that are friends with Orlando Sanchez on my personal Facebook page, that Latinos, Tejanos in Texas would save the state of Texas and keep it red. And in fact, we're seeing that. So much so that according to the Secretary of State's webpage with election results, our friend Tony Gonzalez down in South Texas looks like he's going to beat Gina Ortiz Jones for the U.S. Congress. And that is awfully exciting. As you know, that encompasses counties like Maverick County, which is Eagle Pass, Del Rio, Texas, which is Valverde County, Uvalde County, Kinney County, all of the vast counties all the way out to the Big Bend region. So Tony is doing extremely well. I think we're going to hang on to that seat. And so we're excited. We didn't get involved in that race because we don't get involved in federal races. We get involved only in state races. So we're excited that the House districts that we focused on, we had a tremendous turnout. Here in Harris County, for example, Lacey Hull was elected. Michael Schofield won his seat again.
That he was with us in the show a couple of weeks ago, and congratulations.
J.C. Jeton, who's been on our program before. And
the Railroad Commissioner, Jim Wright, also.
Our Railroad Commissioner won. Our Texas Supreme Court justices won. Our dear friend Brett Busby, who was appointed recently by Governor Abbott to the Supreme Court. He's from Houston. He's one of the most brilliant legal minds that we have ever seen. Got reelected along with the Supreme Court Chief Justice Hecht. So we're extremely proud of what we did. Obviously, the president carried Texas. John Cornyn. It's a race we're not involved in, but we can still talk about it for educational purposes. Did extremely well in spite of the fact that millions and millions of dollars came in from out of state. What happened is that, the people in New York and California tried to California our state, and it didn't work. The only people on the liberal side that are happy today is the media. There are about 20 media. There are about 20 major media markets in Texas.
I know, and they're sad.
No, they're rolling in the money. The hundreds of millions of dollars that the Democrats dumped in hoping to turn Texas blue did not.
I know, but they're sad with the results.
Yeah, but their wallets are full.
Oh, well, that's true.
They're full of Northeast and West Coast cash. So you guys need to invest your money somewhere else. I was hearing this morning that in just 2 Senate races, Lindsey Graham in North Carolina and the race against the majority leader of the Senate, they spent almost $200 million
Wow,
in just two races, Andrea.
that's unbelievable.
So it's obvious that the Democrats don't know how to wisely invest dollars. So that's why you need to vote conservative, and that's why the state of Texas is staying conservative.
Because last year when you ran for city controller, you got amazing results, even though that you didn't win the race, but you got an amazing results, and everybody was thinking that you spent a lot of money on that.
And we
race.
didn't.
No, we didn't.
Conservatives do things a little bit differently than the liberals, right?
Correct. Wise.
That's why they call us conservative.
So Orlando, the definitely, you know, I was reading this morning, and I was reading all these couple of past days about the impact of the Latino vote. Definitely, we make a big difference, and we've been hearing this every election. You know that the Latino is gonna make a difference. The Latino is gonna make a difference. But I think this year it really make a big difference. Florida, Texas. 29 millions of Latinos here in Texas, almost 6 millions are eligible to vote, and people were really voting. And also, like 25%, it was new voters.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, they were Latinos.
Yes. That is something we polled early on. We gauged the level of enthusiasm among Texas Latinos and among Texas Latino conservatives. The enthusiasm level for participating in the elections was through the roof. So we know that Latinos are excited about voting. We know that conservative Latinos are extremely excited about voting. The future, from our perspective, in the state of Texas is extremely bright with respect to the Latino community. Now, we can't do it alone. We're going to need the Republican Party of Texas. We're going to need Republican leaders, all the way from the White House down to the county clerks, working together to address the issues in the communities. I've always said that we can apply conservative principles to urban problems and problems in the state of Texas in the various communities that we have. Conservative principles, conservative solutions always work, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's immigration. Those are the issues that we need to focus on. And if we do that, and we show communities, the diverse communities that we have in the state of Texas, we're going to be fine. We're going to grow in Texas. The conservatives are going to continue to hold on to our statewide position. Obviously, you know that the big battle in Texas was for control of the Texas legislature. Why? Because after the census is in the next legislative session, it is the Texas House that will draw the districts for the new congressional district. It's called reapportionment. And that was what the battle was for in Texas, is what's Texas going to look like in 2022, 2023, and beyond for the next decade.
So how's going to be the map?
Well, we don't know. I mean, the maps are going to depend on the census data and see where communities have grown, see where communities have shrunk. It is projected that Texas is going to gain 3 congressional seats in Washington. So that's a huge gain for Texas.
That's big.
And, you know, and I'm also very proud of Texas, and I'm very proud of Texas conservatives. You know, I said before, and I've said this on the show, that at the beginning of the year that Texas was at a crossroads, that we were either going to become Gray Davis's California, or we were going to become the Texas that we all have known and loved for many years, which is a conservative state that embraces everybody, including our massive Latino community. And fortunately, we became the state, and we were maintained as the state that we all know and love, which is a state that embraces everybody. And we let the left coast do what they're going to do. We want to embrace everybody. We want to include everybody. We want to make sure that everybody has a voice in the conservative movement in Texas.
So, Orlando, so what it means for the next 4 years for Texas, you know, knowing, I mean, of course, we already know that it's a lot of Latinos in Texas. We make a difference. But what did that mean for the next 4 years with our community, of course, after we get the results for the census?
Well, what it means is that Republicans need to delight, celebrate their victory here in Texas for a couple of weeks, but we do need to roll up our sleeves and get to work in the Latino community, which is a community that, in my opinion, and I'm not saying anything new, and I'm not sharing anything new with you guys, because for those of you that have followed me for years know that I've been in Texas politics since 1992, when I was the nominee for House District 132 back in those days. So I have about a 25-year perspective watching Texas politics, and it's the reason we created Texas Latino Conservatives, because we wanted to give some direction to the conservatives, to the Republicans in the state of Texas, on how to win the massive and growing Latino population without compromising our principles. And we do it by simply applying our conservative philosophy to the problems of those communities, that we need to roll up our sleeves and go campaign in those communities. We need to get to know those communities. I tell the story often, and it's worth repeating, that when I was a young city councilman in the city of Houston, by the way, the first Hispanic immigrant elected citywide in the city of Houston, I sat next to a Democrat, and I just had a lot of admiration for John, because he had been very involved in the civil rights struggle in the state of Texas and in the South. And out of curiosity one day I said, "Hey John, when was the last time you saw a conservative campaigning on Houston's East End," which was at that time District I, still is District I. And he said, "Oh, the only person I've seen that's a Republican campaigning on our neck of the woods was Senator John Tower." Senator John Tower was elected Republican senator since Reconstruction in Texas with the help of the Latino community. And ever since then, we've done quite well with the Latino vote in Texas. George Bush did very well. When George Bush was running for office, it's estimated he won well over 45% of the Latino vote in Texas. But despite that, today, our percentages among Latinos has dropped. We're still at that, in that area where it's enough Latinos to carry us across, and thank God, as I predicted, that it would be Latinos in South Texas, the Tejano community, that would save the state of Texas and keep it red. But we've got to expand our base in the Latino community, and I think we can do that, as I said, by reaching out to them and addressing issues important to them.
And I will add something very important, that I'm Colombiana, you're from Cuba. Not only to reach out the Latino community, but to understand the Latino community. When I say understand the Latino community, is to not see everybody as just Latinos, but to see everybody as Colombians, Venezuelans, Cubans. We are from different part of the Latin America, and we come with different mentality, and we are a total different community between in the Latino community.
Yeah. I rarely disagree with you, but I'm going to disagree a little bit. I do think it's important that people get to know the Latino community. You're absolutely right. There is a difference between a South Floridian that's of Cuban descent and Puerto Rican descent and Haitian descent, Jamaican descent, Colombian descent. Same as in Houston and Texas. There is a vast difference between the Colombian community and the Cuban community and the Mexican American community. But we are all citizens of the United States, and we're all Texans. That's how we should see each other. It is nice that everybody sort of learns a little bit about our culture and knows the nuances, right? But not everybody needs to understand that Venezuelans eat arepas and, Cubans eat empanadas.
What I mean to understand is when you reach out to a community, it's like when I told in marketing, you need to understand your audience.
Oh, I agree.
And that's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by that. Is that you don't have to know if you eat arepas or you eat tacos, because I love tacos as much as I eat, and I love arepas, and I love arepas colombianas as much as I love arepas venezolanas, which is different. And if some Venezuelans are watching or some Colombian, they're gonna debate
Vamos a invitar que los venezolanos nos traigan arepas
y los
un
colombianos
colombiano
a ver
traigan
cuáles
arepas
están
y vamos a
mejores.
probarlas aquí. Yo voy a ser el juez.
Exacto. It's always debatable, but that's what I mean, that you need to understand your audience, because also the way that the Latino community vote is also depend of where they're coming from.
Yeah.
You know, the Venezuelans, they don't vote, or South American, they don't vote the same way or for the same party that the Central American or Mexican people.
Yeah, that may be true. And but I mean, at the end of the day, as you know, our philosophy is that the pan-Hispanic, right, meaning all the countries, we tend to fall on the more conservative side. We're not wacko liberals. We don't embrace socialism. We want to work. You know, one of the interesting results that I've been watching is the state of Nevada in Clark County, which encompasses Las Vegas. And I don't know what the outcome of that is going to be, and I haven't looked at it this morning. But I will say that Hispanics in Las Vegas, which make up a huge percentage of the employees of the casinos, those families were tired of being shut down. They want to get back to work because, you know, this shutdown is affecting what we call our frontline employees, right? Mm-hmm. The pandemic is affecting our frontline employees, but the shutdown is hurting us economically as well.
Yeah.
So families are wanting to get back to work. That's why it's important. That's why I say conservatives need to start focusing on the healthcare issues of the Latino community. If we're going to be frontline workers, that means bus drivers and working in school kitchens and being bus drivers and municipal employees, you know, the services that are absolutely essential to keep the country running. Well, then, you know, we've got to figure out, you know, why is the mortality rate among the Latino community higher than it is anyone else with respect to COVID-19. So, you know, again, those are little nuances that as conservatives we need to figure out, you know, how do we address those issues and how do we make it better for those communities.
So knowing that in Texas we keep it red also in the Congress, how did the new legislator look like?
In Washington or Texas?
In Texas.
Well, the legislature will be conservative.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we kept the House, so there's not going to be many changes. I mean, you know, instead of having Dwayne Bohack in House District 138 in Houston, we're going to have Lacey Hall. Mm-hmm. You know, again, in House District 132, which is the west portion of Harris County, we're going to have Michael Schofield instead of the Democrat that was in that office. J.C. Jatan, we held on to that seat in Fort Bend County. With respect to Justin Ray, had there not been a libertarian in that race, we would have won that race. But we're behind by about 300 or 400 votes. So the legislature is going to stay in conservative hands. The committee assignments are going to be, you know, the chairs of the committees are going to be mostly conservatives, and we were going to continue to be a state that believes in entrepreneurship, low taxation, limited government regulation. We're going to continue to blossom economically in Texas. We all know that the state of Texas is growing exponentially. Let me repeat that. The state of Texas is growing exponentially because people from liberal states are flooding into the South. The Sun Belt is growing. The East Coast is dying. It's withering because of over-taxation, over-regulation, booming property taxes. In New York, you got property taxes, you got sales taxes, you got excise taxes, you got federal taxes. There's a tax for everything. And in California, there's even a tax for flatulence of the bovines.
Yeah, for everything.
Every time a cow farts, they charge you.
Yeah, they charge you just to breathe over there because they have a beautiful weather. So, Harris County. Let's talk about Harris County. You know, I mean, these elections just completely it turned to the Democratic Party.
Yeah, oh yeah, as it did 2016 in 2018. Yeah, Harris County, unfortunately, like a couple of other counties in Texas, Dallas County, Travis County, which is Austin, Harris County, which is Houston, Bexar County, which is San Antonio, are off the deep end, right there. They have become so blue that there's probably very little opportunity for conservatives to win that. Now, here's the problem, and I'm gonna say this because I've been saying it all along. In 2018, Harris County had a very low crime rate. Our budget was balanced. We had cash in the bank because I was county treasurer for 12 years. So we had plenty of money. We weren't issuing as many bonds. We were refinancing bonds at lower rates, and we weren't doing tax anticipation notes. So we were lowering the debt burden on the taxpayers of Harris County. Fast forward to 2020 under Democrat leadership. They tried to have a 10% property increase. Thank goodness the two conservatives on the commissioner's court walked out, so that didn't happen. They're going to form a private corporation to raid the Harris County Toll Road Authority so that these liberal commissioners get to play games with the dollars, the expensive toll fees that you're paying in Harris County. The crime rate is skyrocketing in Harris County. There's about a 30% increase in homicides. It's only going to get worse. So I predicted that the debt would increase in Harris County, that crime would increase in Harris County, and that taxes would increase in Harris County. All three of those predictions are coming true. Now, keep an eye on Harris County because I think you're going to see an exodus of people from Harris County moving out to the suburbs. The suburbs are growing. The suburbs in Texas are growing. And so, unfortunately, and it's sad because I came to Houston in 1962, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful city and a wonderful community. But the leadership in Harris County is marginal at best and very questionable at worst.
So Orlando, now we have a guest, and you know he's been super busy as many political analysis in these elections, but he made the time to be with us in the show, and I know him for like pretty much I think 15 plus 8 years. He is a professor for the University of Houston and also political analysis, and he's always everywhere in the map. And he's helping us today to navigate what is being going on in the presidential election. And his name is Jeronimo Cortina. Jeronimo, ¿cómo estás?
Bien, muchas gracias. Thank you for inviting me. Such a pleasure.
Professor, it's good to see you, and as you know, I'm a graduate of the University of Houston's Department of Political Science, so, you know, we always recruit the best, so we're real honored to have you on the program.
Oh, thank you, Orlando. Yes, I know you are one of our distinguished alumni at the Department of Political Science, and I'm very happy to be here with you guys.
So, Professor, we want to talk a little bit, you know, we don't want to make it a partisan issue, but we want to talk about things that Andrea's been asking me about this morning. One, let's talk a little bit about the demographics of the state of Texas with respect to the Latino community. Where are we and where are we going? And more importantly, politically, what did you see last night and what do you project for the future?
Well, those are very good, interesting questions. So first of all, we know that, you know, the state has been changing. By 2022, Latinos are going to be the biggest demographic group in the state. I think that we have seen in this election very significant participation of young Latino voters and primarily young Latinas participating. So this is extremely encouraging, and also it's very significant since it seems that Latina women are taking in charge the whole, I guess, increase of political participation among the Latino community. So, for example, in Harris County, we saw significant participation of Gen Zs, Latino women, of millennials as well, and also some starting, you know, to increase and in some cases overshadow Latino men participation across all these age groups. So that's extremely important. The second point is that, as we know, and we have had many discussions about this before, the Latino vote is not a homogeneous vote. That means that the Latino vote is not 100% Democrat, not 100% Republican, and also partisanship seems to be something that has more dynamism within the Latino community in comparison to other demographic groups. So what does this mean? Well, it means that, you know, when political parties have the right outreach strategy, then, you know, they can make inroads within the Latino electorate. In terms of turnout, I think, especially in the big Texas Triangle, meaning Harris County, Bear County, and also Travis County, and well, Travis County, and also down up north, Dallas County, Collin County, we saw an increase in Latino turnout. However, we saw lower Latino turnout last night, especially in the Valley. So it's a different situation down there. I think coronavirus had a significant impact in making Latinos' decisions to turn out or not. So those particular places play a very important role. And, you know, yesterday people were asking me about, you know, if the Latino vote was going to play a very significant role in the election. And I think that the Latino vote basically decided the election in the state, whether voting for one candidate or the other. And also, more importantly, regarding turnout. If Latinos didn't vote yesterday, as we saw, for example, in the Valley, in Hidalgo County, so on and so forth, then those have political implications.
Professor, I just wanted your take. There was, as you know, down in Maverick County, which is home to Eagle Pass, there was a candidate by the name of Tony Gonzalez, and there were actually two Latinos, both veterans, that competed for that. Tony Gonzalez won the Republican nomination, but he seems to be holding on to that seat, which, as you know, is not only home to Eagle Pass, but also Del Rio in Valverde County, which is north of Ciudad Acuña in the state of Chihuahua. They have Kinney County, which has the biggest city there is Brackettville, Texas, and encompasses portions of the western area of Bexar County, which is San Antonio, and actually Uvalde. It has many, many counties in there, but Tony Gonzalez seems to be holding on. You have any thoughts on that, and have you looked at it, and were you surprised by that?
Well, I mean, I was a little bit surprised. He was running against Ortiz Jones, and that's a seat that Will Hurd vacated this election. Basically, it's you know, it was a Republican. It is still a Republican seat, but it was barely a Republican seat. Last election, Will Hurd in 2018 won re-election by a very, very, very small margin. So everyone was expecting that Gene Ortiz Jones was going to win the election. So I think that, you know, that is the case in terms of Latinos not turning out at the same numbers that we saw in 2018. And also 2018 is a very interesting election, given that you have, let's call it the Beto O'Rourke effect, right? And I think that the Beto O'Rourke effect, you know, was not very significant during this election. In addition, obviously, with the context of the coronavirus, right? So when you put all those things together, you get these results that, to a certain extent, are very surprising. But, you know, Tony Gonzalez and Gene Ortiz Jones, I think it's a very interesting race in terms of how the Latino vote actually played a very important role in determining one possibility is Latinos voting for Mr. Gonzalez, or the other possibility is Latinos not going out to vote. And also that had an impact on the chances of Gene Ortiz Jones. But obviously we don't have the data right now to make those assertions, and we just have to keep waiting a little bit more so until we can get our hands in
real quick, and I'm going to let Andrea come in, but according to the Secretary of State's website, which has got the most up-to-date data, as you mentioned, that district was won narrowly last time, but Tony Gonzalez is enjoying almost a 51 to 46% lead, so that's pretty significant in my opinion. You're stating that Latinos weren't turning out in as high a numbers as they had in the past, but my reports from the people on the ground is that both in Hidalgo County and in Maverick County, which is Eagle Pass, that Latinos were saying that they were voting conservative more than they have in the past. So it'll be interesting to see that data. But Andrea, I guess you have some questions.
Yeah, Jeronimo, we've been talking in the past, many interviews that I have done with you, and we were always saying that the Latino vote is important, el gigante dormido que no salía a votar. So how do you see that gigante dormido in these 2020 elections and in the next 2 and 4 years?
Well, I think it's a call to action, especially for political parties, right? And political parties, both big parties, have not done a great job in courting the Latino vote. And I think that given the demographic vote and what happened this election, it is evident right now that if you don't have the Latino vote in the winning coalition, it's going to be very complicated to win statewide elections. Also, we have to know that, generally speaking, the state is becoming more and more competitive. Just going back to 2012, Mitt Romney won the state with a difference of almost 16%. In 2016, President Trump won it with a difference of 9%. And this election is between 5 and 6%. So what we're seeing is that the narrow or the margin of victory of the Republican Party is getting smaller and smaller and smaller every electoral cycle. So I think that, having competitive elections is good for democracy. Having competitive elections is good for public policy, because public policies tend to be more, talked between different parties, and that talking process most of the times brings better commitments and better compromises that benefit the design and implementation of public policy.
Yeah, so I would, Professor Cortina, I would argue that it is eschewing, in my opinion, the state of Texas, if we look at just the results of President Trump, because if you go just one notch down the ballot, you'll see that Senator Cornyn, as of today, has a 10-point lead over MJ Hagar. How do you account for that disparity? In other words, you're claiming Trump is leading by 5 to 6 points, but John Cornyn is leading the state by 10 percentage points.
Right. So when John Cornyn won re-election in 2014, he won by 27 points. So that's what I'm looking at, right? I'm looking historically in terms of those margins of victory. Yes, Senator Cornyn won, and also has to do to a certain extent with, the kind of candidates that sometimes the Republicans that the Democratic Party is running. The differences that we saw with Mr. O'Rourke and running against Senator Cruz, and now with Ms. Hager running against Senator Cornyn, it's two different type of candidates, right? Two different type of appeals. Mr. O'Rourke had, a very good sense of communication, a very different type of political discourse that really resonated among young voters. This time, it's kind of iffy what was the impact of MJ Hager on young voters. That could really make the difference in terms of these things. So, yes, you're right. You see that disparity. Obviously, when you're going down the ballot, you see that having not straight ticket voting has consequences. And one of those consequences is that people might skip one election or just fill out the presidential election and then be done. And that's why we observe those differences in those margins.
I'm curious to find out if you believe that MJ Hagar would have done better. She would have put her name on the ballot as Maria Juanita Hagar.
I don't know. Maybe.
Jeronimo, what is the biggest challenge that you see on both parties to reach out the Hispanic community? And what is our part as a Hispanic community, the challenge that we face from now on and the compromise that we have from now on? And I was telling Orlando earlier, before you connect with us, that I think one of the biggest problems is like the parties see us as Latinos, but they don't see us as a different target audience. You know, like we're different in South America than in Central America than in Mexico, and I think it's important to learn and understand our community, because Latin America is not only big, and not because we speak Spanish, we're all the same.
Right. Well, I think it has to do primarily, both political parties have to do their homework in terms of how to reach the community. The Latino vote, as I said before, is not a homogeneous block that you can just, do X, Y, or Z and have a blanket strategy that would cover all Latinos. We're referring, for example, in Texas, well, someone that lives in the valley is completely different, right, in terms of political preferences and political leanings than someone that lives, for example, in North Texas or that lives in Houston. So different strategies have to be, applied. Part of my research, has shown that, when you look at it in terms of, let's say, cultural and political traits that feed into one or the other political party, you can make an argument that Latinos are the natural constituency of the Republican Party, right? Latinos overall tend to be more conservative on certain issues, but also Latinos tend to be more progressive on certain issues, right? So you're not going to win the Latino vote by just flagging conservative issues all the way. You have to have a mix of different strategies that would allow political parties to go one way or the other. So what I'm trying to say is that both political parties have a chance in making significant inroads into the Latino electorate, but they have, first of all, to invest significant amount of money. They have to start developing young leaders that will later take control of our political leadership. And also, the national, the DNC and the RNC have to invest heavily in Texas. So this election can be seen, depending on your political leanings, as a victory for the Republican Party, but also as a victory for the Democratic Party, since these margins of victory have been, getting narrower and narrower with every electoral cycle. So it's a process. The process has started. And I think that one or the other political party who says, okay, we're going to invest, are going to be the political party that can make more significant inroads.
I couldn't agree more, Professor Cortina. As you know, and I mentioned earlier before you got on the program, ever since I graduated from the University of Houston and I became a Republican nominee for a House district in 1992, I've been a keen observer, not only academically, as an undergrad in political science, but also as a participant in the political process, and also as an immigrant of Cuban descent, but has grown up in Texas admiring and watching the Mexican-American, particularly the Tejano community, which I'm a big fan of. And I've always said, and that's the reason we formed the Texas Latino Conservatives, because the party, the Republican Party, was not making the investments necessary, and we were losing that percentage. I tell people all the time that John Tower, I told the story, won Texas as the first Republican elected to the U.S. Senate since Reconstruction with the help of the Latino community and with the help of an advertising Mexican-American out of Bexar County. And George Bush got into anywhere above 42% of the Latino vote when he ran for governor. So how far we've fallen, I mean, we're still getting about 30%, maybe plus or minus, but we've lost a significant percentage of the Latino vote. So that's exactly right. I think we have to invest in the Latino community. We have to incorporate the Latino community into, from our perspective, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but into the conservative movement, and start applying, this is what I tell my conservative colleagues, start applying your conservative values to problems in the Hispanic community, because God knows we have several issues that need to be addressed.
Right. And I think it's a combination. I think that, when you're talking about, let's say, certain, issues that tend to be culturally conservative or not. I don't think that, the right mix is just going one way or the other, but also, bringing another set of mixes, right? You have to bring issues about affordable healthcare. You have to bring issues about education. You have to bring issues about wages and income. So it's a mix that, it's not a one side aspects of doing these inroads within the Latino electorate, but has to have the right balance of issues. And Latinos have been that consistently since we have, the first national poll of Latinos back in 1989. It's a mix of issues, and those mix of issues have shifted one way or the other, but you still have to provide a set of combination that would be palatable to the Latino electorate.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, one of the biggest frustrations for me has been to watch as the Republicans sit by, knowing that there are issues with respect to health care that disproportionately, and we all know this is not, a new revelation for us, but the Latino community has issues with respect to diabetes, for example. I was visiting with my friend Adrian Garcia the other morning. In fact, Andrea and I had breakfast with Adrian Garcia, who represents the east part of Houston in Precinct 2. And I think that Adrian made the comment, if I'm not mistaken, that there are no or very few juvenile endocrinologists on the east side of Houston.
Correct.
And when you start looking at the east side of Houston, there's a dearth of medical facilities for that community. With respect to immigration, I have been aghast at the Republicans haven't made a move to come up with a conservative solution for immigration problems. Professor, we've done a poll in the state of Texas because we just thought Republicans were afraid of their own shadows. And a couple of months ago, we ran a poll in the 5 largest counties in Texas where we polled known Republican primary voters, and we asked them if they would be in favor of a immigration reform that allowed a permit for residency renewable every 5 years, provided there were no penal code violations, renewable every 5 years, and that the applicant paid all the fees. Over 70% of Republican primary voters supported that. Yet you can't find a Republican to get behind this issue on figuring out how to apply conservative principles to immigration issues. As you know, in 2018, I held a press conference in front of the Hattie Mae administration building at the Houston Independent School District because I was shocked at the results that the Latino community is getting out of the third largest school district in the United States, in which I was somewhat savagely attacked by the left and water was poured on my head. But what we're trying to do is signal to the conservative leadership in the state that health care, education, family values, access to better health care, immigration reform are all important issues for the Latino community.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's a mix. So that's why, it's important. And, I think that both political parties after this election have to really think about what they're going to be doing in the future. I don't think that, the brand of the Republican Party, at least in Texas, works for all Texans. And I don't think that the brand of the Democratic Party in Texas works for all Texans. So both parties will have to take assessment and see what they did correctly and what they did wrong.
And I totally agree with you when you said different strategies need to be in place, because the face of the Latin community is been changing a lot. It's not the same one 20, 30 years ago that it's today, because now the immigrants like me, that I became a U.S. citizen, I have kids. And now my kids are a mix of cultures. And it happened to many people now. Is for the first time this year, we have a lot of 18 years old new Latinos voting for the first time, but they were born in this country. So, of course, I mean, they've been raising us in the Latino home, but in this country. So it's a mix of things. So definitely we need different strategies to target the Latino community, not only based by country, but also based by if they were born in this country or they are immigrants.
Exactly, exactly, and that has very important implications, right? Because second and third Latino generation, are basically 100% Americans. The issue of identity, right? The issue of identity is not as highlighted or as important as for perhaps first generation Latinos. So that's a different approach, and that different approach has to have different political outreach strategies. And I think that part of why political parties are not engaged in that is because of the basic a lack of knowledge of the community, and also because it's some sort of a return on investment, and I see it that way. I think if you're thinking like a political party, you say, well, I have $1. Where am I going to invest that dollar? Am I going to invest it in a certain demographic that is going to give me 1 or 2 or maybe 3 votes out of that dollar of investment in advertisement, going knockout on doors? Or am I going to invest it in a community that is going to give me, perhaps a return on investment, maybe 50%? Well, you invest in that community that is going to give you the votes. However, the state has changed so much in the past years in terms of demographics and in terms of Latino voter registration that now political parties have not that chance. And if they don't start today, the elections are going to be extremely, extremely complicated to win.
Professor, I want to crow a little bit. I want to brag a little bit on our organization, which is, by all accounts, a relatively new organization in Texas. We really got started back in January. I think we had maybe 10 Facebook likes.
Yeah.
We're approaching 6,000 likes now. And but here was our strategy. Our strategy was that we didn't have the resources to take on all the state of Texas. But what we had seen is that we were focused on preserving the Texas House of Representatives in the hands of conservatives. And we went through 25 House districts, and we identified about más o menos 80,000 what we call low propensity or dormant Hispanic voters. These are voters that we had scored based on some data that we have access to, that had at one time voted conservative and are in fact conservatives, but had not been touched by either political party. So we did mail, we did digital advertising, we did texting, we did live phone calling, we did robocalls, we block walked into those communities, and I'm happy to report today that in those districts where we focused, we were very successful. We accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. 80% of our targeted voters actually voted and participated. And so you're absolutely right. None of that is cheap. All took a lot of resources. And it is exactly right. I'm on the board of a bank, and return on investment is extremely important for our shareholders. And but the problem with political parties, Professor, as you know, I often say that political parties sort of wake up every 24 months and, oh my God, we have an election and here's our limited dollars and let's put it in this election. And after the election, they go away. I remember famously a couple of years ago when Barack Obama won, the Republican Party in Washington, D.C. did a post-mortem analysis. And everything we're talking about was in that post-mortem. And yet they haven't done anything to invest in those communities to change the trajectory of the downward spiral the Republican Party was in.
Right. And that will keep going until, there's a different approach. And it's the future. I mean, it's how competitive. I mean, just imagine if, yesterday's election put President Trump and Vice President Biden basically tied. We did a survey at the University of Houston with Univision, and that's what we have. We had them 49-46, basically within the margin of error, and that's what happened. But, it could have gone a different way, right? It could have gone for Joe Biden as easy as it went for President Trump. And if the Republican Party had lost Texas, that was it. I mean, there's nothing else that they could do in order to maintain the presidency, and perhaps it would have gone down the ballot. So it's a time that is extremely important for both political parties to take advantage of how competitive the state is going. And I think that at the end is going to have very important implications for our community, because our community is going to go, or is going to start, at least in certain parts of the state, being taken more seriously by political parties. And that is going to create, the type of policies that our community, and in fact, all Texans need. Issues about education. Who doesn't care about education? Issues about healthcare. Yeah. Whatever the final policy is, that doesn't matter, right? But we need healthy population, because if we don't have healthy population, then we cannot work. Then we cannot create more jobs, et cetera, et cetera. If we don't have an educated labor force, where is that labor force going to come up? I mean, maybe it's going to come from out of state. Do we want to do that? I don't think so. So it's, good, solid public policies to have economic growth, to have healthy population, to have educated population. And again, it's not about the quantity of opportunities, but it's about the quality of opportunities that all Texans should have. That's fair game for both political parties.
And Jeronimo, we've been talking about what the parties need to be done and how to reach out the Hispanic community. Now in our side, as a community, as a Hispanic community, we're growing, but we don't have political representation. What it takes for our community to take that big step and say, I am here and my voice, and I'm going to represent my voice and my community.
Well, I think first of all is going to be political participation, right? One way or the other. I think that, our community is not going to be taken seriously until we show the numbers, right? And political participation is extremely important. And it's also important to be constant, right? Having a constant show up at the polls. I'm very encouraged by the number of young people that I saw voting the first time in this election, because once they start voting in this election, that means that they're going to continue to vote in the next elections. So that's a very encouraging sign. And I think that eventually, that political participation is going to turn in different ways. And also look at public office, right? I think that, Latinos have to run. And I think that even though, depending on political views, one may see, for example, Judge Hidalgo as, whatever it is. But the fact is that it's a young Latina running, one of the biggest, the third or second biggest county in the United States. So that has very important implications, right? That shows that we can win elections. That shows that our community is prepared to lead one of the most complicated counties in the country. Whatever is the political views on one side or the other, I think that those are very important messages to the community, especially for young Latinas, that say, you can do it. One side or the other. If you want, you can do it.
Well, I agree. And first of all, let me say, I had breakfast with Bob Stein, your colleague at Rice University, and he mentioned to me about 2 years ago, he says, Orlando, those young Latinos that came out in 2018 are coming back out. And sure enough, not only did they come out, but they're growing in numbers. But I take great comfort in that, because this is what I say. Today's young liberal is tomorrow's conservative. So that's the job of the Texas Latino conservatives, Professor Cortina. We're very honored to have had you on the program. I'm also extremely pleased that the University of Houston has hired a caliber professor that understands the diverse communities of Texas and Houston, and you're a tremendous asset to our community. You're a tremendous asset to the university, and I want to thank you. I know you're very busy today for taking a few minutes to spend time with us and sharing your views from a political scientist perspective. So we appreciate it. Andrea, dale una gran despedida al profesor y a nuestros televidentes.
Jerónimo, mil gracias por tu tiempo. De verdad que yo sé que estás súper ocupado, pero siempre nos regalas un pedacito de tu tiempo. Y como siempre te escribo en redes sociales, mi analista político favorito.
Muchas gracias, Andrea. Thank you, Orlando. It's a pleasure always to have these conversations. And Godspeed with your project. And the more the merrier that we have, and just have, these dialogues are extremely important. And, anytime you guys, where to find me.
Thank you, Professor.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bueno, Andrea,
Bye-bye.
Llegamos a la conclusión de otra semana en Texas Latino Conservatives Live on Facebook. Te agradezco.
En nuestro nuevo estudio.
Estuvimos hasta la madrugada y hasta esta mañana despierto, pero aquí estamos compartiendo con el público lo que hemos hecho. Yo personalmente estoy súper orgulloso de nuestra organización, Texas Latino Conservatives. Yo prognostiqué que eran los tejanos y los latinos que iban a salvar el estado de Texas y mantenerlos en la columna roja, y eso efectivamente es lo que ha sucedido. Tenemos una tarea muy grande adelante de nosotros. Felicitamos a todos los candidatos, los ganadores y los que fueron derrotados, porque es una tarea muy difícil. Ser candidato es difícil, así que felicidades a todos ustedes, aunque hayan ganado o sean derrotados.
Y esa derrota es un aprendizaje.
Ustedes aprendieron, están aprendiendo, están contribuyendo y como dicen mis amigos mexicanos, con ganas adelante para el futuro. Los invitamos la semana que viene a esta hora a que nos acompañen. Sigan votando, sigan participando y manténganse
y nosotros
saludables.
los ayudamos, si ellos quieren, lanzarse para una posición. Eso es lo más importante.
Así que visítenos en nuestra página web, que es
TexasLatinoConservatives.com, TexasLatinoConservatives.com. You're going to find a lot of information. Become a member. Be part of this family that is growing. We're having a lot of members now that are supporting us. And, I'm so happy that lately I've been reading messages on Facebook that people said, like, how can I get involved? How can I get involved? How can I help to grow this and to be part of this? And I am so happy because, we've been working so hard all these 10, 11 months.
10 seconds.
Yeah, 10, 11 months. And that's why we need you. So thank you so much. See you next Wednesday in TLC Live.
God bless.